Call to order tonight's work session for the Hudson School Board. Topics for discussion, we'll start with the Market and Johnson action item. That would go to Bonnie.
Sure. So in your packet, we did have two. $82,835,083 under budget.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Kate?
I have a question. So that's wonderful that we are under budget. What happens with that under budget?
So this is just one
Monies.
portion of the referendum, so we still are going to work with Bray on their contract. That's kind of our next step, and then all the auxiliary charges for like our permits and things like that. We hope to have that finalized in the next couple of months to bring to you.
Okay.
Because we are using part of our fund balance, whatever we don't use remains in the fund balance. So we'll
Okay.
send a reconciliation for you. We're done with change orders and all of that has been reconciled.
And can you explain a little bit more what the punch list is? Because I kind of remember, but it's a little foggy for
Sure.
me.
So basically, at the end of the projects, we walked through with the contractors and the architect. We made a list of all the things that we weren't satisfied with or they hadn't completed. They've been working off that list, and they are hoping to get all that work completed shortly. A lot of work is being scheduled over Christmas break as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. President?
Molly?
So on this bill, Bonnie, it says Hudson Middle School, I assume that's what it is, in district office. So should we expect further billings for North Hudson and EP Rock?
Yep,
Okay.
They just didn't get them in by the deadline for this meeting,
Okay.
so. Yep,
Thank you.
yep.
And then do we do like a one-year walkthrough as well, or how does that work?
We actually have a 2-year warranty, so we'll do a 1-year walkthrough and then a 2-year
So
walkthrough.
very similar to in the high school.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr.
Maria?
President, and just to clarify, so building off of what Molly said, just to make sure the document you're saying, you're providing us here with the 282,000 in savings. That accounts for the final bills that you're expecting to come in on the elementaries that are not maybe here, didn't meet today's deadline, but you've already anticipated them and accounted for them in this
Yep, and also-
analysis here, so.
Correct, and also all the retainage that we're
And all
building.
that.
Yep.
Perfect, thank
Yep.
you.
You guys will be seeing bills from Market and Johnson probably for the next 5 or 6 months on and off as we release retainage. This is the kind of final contractual amount is what you see on that spreadsheet that Bonnie gave you. So typically this is in the consent agenda.
If no other questions, I'd accept a motion to approve.
Mr. President,
Megan?
I make a motion that the Chief Financial and Operations Officer be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $342,997.47.
I second.
Second for
Wait,
Maria.
did I say that right?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Hearing no opposition, it passes. Okay, then we are going to do B, is that correct?
Yeah.
So, Nick?
Yep. So we just, because we're refinancing the bonds, we have to make sure the wording is right. This is there are certain times when the wording doesn't have to be perfect, and there's other times it has to be kind of perfect. And so it was kind of jumbled a little bit when you guys already approved this 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I can't remember when it was. So we thought in an abundance of caution, we would just have you reapprove the exact same thing. So in this case, yeah, I think we gave the exact wording for Megan to read. So this is something you guys have already seen. This isn't another 51 million. This is just reissuing.
Mr. President,
Megan.
I move to approve the resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of not to exceed 51 million general obligation refunding bonds.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Brian. Any questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Hearing none, passes. Next up is the monthly budget update, again with our friend Bonnie.
Great. So you brought up the general fund expense variances. The majority of the items on the list are all due to timing that can vary, and some accounting changes with Woofer. We also, the Fund 10 fund balance and construction projects we pulled out, put at the bottom and noted that. So of that 15 million, we've only spent 11.9 million at this point. So that is that. I think that is pretty much it. I would anticipate, we are running ahead, but we've not received billings yet for snow removal. We got hit pretty hard with the last snowstorm, and it was a little that continued to give for several days. So I do anticipate that's going to be increased over last year, but our heating costs are actually lower than previously, so we'll keep an eye on that for you. One
Mr.
other thing
President, can I ask a question, Bonnie, while
Sure.
we're on this page? I'm trying hard to learn all
Yeah.
the different funds here. Could you just speak on the community service line, on what that all kind of covers within the district? It's on the very first page of the district.
Sure, so Fund 80 is community service, so that constitutes our community recreation program, also our school age care, and our, what's the other one I'm missing? The fitness center. Middle school activities, and the police liaison officers.
Excellent, thank you.
One other thing I just wanted to mention is, and you might have seen this in the legislature, we had anticipated getting special ed funding at 42%. They are now saying that that could be 35%. There is a proposal that's floating around to see if they will refund that money back into the budget. If it doesn't, we will have a deficit of about $1 million. So we will keep our eye on that, but I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar.
Bonnie, is that for 1 year or 2 years then?
It'll keep getting worse.
It'll keep getting worse.
So they did a some certain amount versus a some sufficient amount, and so since they underestimated what the special education costs were going to be, and they distributed across the board, essentially, so for our district alone, we were planning on getting another $1 million this current fiscal year for special ed reimbursement that we're not going to get. So that'll get a hit to the budget, and then if it continues down the same path it's on, because they're doing some certain instead of some sufficient, it could be, next year, it could be $1.5 million, $2 million additional to the million this year. It's just gonna start compounding.
Additional to what, the 8 that we funded last year? Or
Yeah, so essentially, we built our budget around getting 42% reimbursement, what we thought we would get. And because now the state's saying, nope, you're not gonna get that much, it's gonna be back down closer to, 35 potentially. That means that, that's $1 million of fund balance, or essentially, I think we were gonna finish the year
1.3.
1.3 to the good. So now all of a sudden, instead of finishing the year 1.3 positive, we, could potentially finish the year only at 300,000 positive. But also then meaning that next year, the projections get even worse. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to get you, maybe a new set of updated projections, 5-year projections, and show you what this is long-term going to cost.
okay, Brian was next.
Yeah, do you have comments on what happened? Was it just a poor estimate at the time, or costs are higher across the state? And
I think what they're saying is they underestimated what districts were going to put it, because your special education aid is based on prior year expenses. So I think they underestimated what districts were going to have for the prior year.
Molly?
Thanks. Can you go just a really quick shorthand? What's the difference between some certain and some sufficient? Anybody?
So some certain is they allocate a specific dollar amount to be distributed across all districts. So they say 600 million or 500 million or 400 million, whatever it is. And then depending on how the reimbursements come in, it can it can lower or raise. Some sufficient would be that they say, we are going to guarantee that we're going to pay for 42% of special ed reimbursement, which then means that they are on the hook. If the cost goes up, they're on the hook to allocate more money. They've said they aren't willing to do some sufficient, because it leaves them on the hook for too much. But I will say that it's getting to the point now, especially with this latest one, that all it's really going to take is probably one school district that's going to file, more than likely going to file lawsuit with the state Supreme Court for inadequacy of funding and not meeting their obligations. And then the problem is, and this is kind of what got them moving in this direction to start with, is they could be on the hook for 100% reimbursement. And so that's what all of a sudden got them talking about 42, 45, and 60 and things like that. And people thought, in good faith, hey, 42 and 45 is not 60, but it's a good chunk. But now all of a sudden it's looking like it's just not going to keep up.
Thank you.
Mr. President. Nick, where were the numbers, like, just the last 2 years? Can you just speak on that? Weren't we already at like 35 and we thought we were going to see the increase, or was it less than that? Can we just talk about that for a second?
Yeah. I think we were right around 33.
Yeah, 30, I want to say 31. I know we gave it to you the last couple months, but right around 30%. So going from 30% to 42, we were pretty excited. Going back down to 35 is a hit. And the second year of the budget, it's supposed to be at 45%, which we included in the projection. So now I'm guessing that would be closer to the 36%.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, and I know we don't have final financials yet, like audited financials for last fiscal year, but wasn't it almost $9.5 million for special ed from our general fund to our special ed fund?
Correct.
So now we had thought it might go down more.
We had
Then it
projected
will.
about 8.5 million.
Okay. Total bummer is the only words I feel like I can use.
I mean, the
with that
only
right now.
positive thing in the argument's sake is that everybody's getting hit with this. So, I mean, it hits every school district. So if legislators are listening to their school districts, it's not, the rich versus the poor districts. It's every district is going to have the same impact. So I think that's a good argument, like, wow, this is going to hurt everybody.
Is there a potential, if one school district files suit, that it would become multiple school districts would join that suit, or?
I'm not that, I guess I would be in.
Andrea's nodding yes, so.
Oh, yeah.
Likely, if there's impact for everybody, it
Yeah.
wouldn't be unlikely.
Yeah. I mean, equalization aid is different where every district is different, but this aid, every district is treated the exact same way. It's a percentage of expenses.
Okay.
So sorry for that bad news.
Not your fault.
Any other questions for Bonnie? Then moving on to Andrea with policy review, 200 series.
Yes, so as you know, last time we came to you with the 200 series, asking if you had any specific requests, and we had some conversation regarding that. Here is now the finalized recommendation for the 200 series review. As you can see, there just aren't many changes. There's just no need to do so. My understanding, based on reading through all the policies, is that there's nothing substantive that needs to change. They're primarily cleanup items. The procedure 221.1, that's again a change just to the policy because that's consistent with what we've been doing from top to bottom of the review of the policies. It's just been several years since we've looked at this 200 series. So bringing that in line with our other policy series. Then 254 is the one where there's not a change to the policy language itself. However, have an updated draft classroom teacher job description for your consideration that I'd brought forward last time. And then we will continue to bring job descriptions that are DPI licensed positions for consideration going forward. I believe the next group to be considered would be the cabinet level positions, other than the superintendents, which is part of the board policy 254.1, right below that, which is the one we're deleting because we have it repetitive somehow. It's exact same language.
Okay, and then there'd be one more reading on that, right? Or-
And this is just presentation, so the first reading would be at the board meeting in January and the second reading in February.
Very good. No questions, we'll move on to open enrollment determination. Andrea?
I get to go again with Tara. So the first part is, this is the annual determination for open. As you know, several years ago, we've modified our practices to be much more open when it comes to open enrollment. What we did here is have a recommendation that we would not limit spaces other than for special education programming, which Tara will hit on in 1 second. And then we gave you an 8-year history below to see the number of applications received, the applications denied, and then the students attending on third Friday. You can see we are up quite a bit compared to 24, 25 even, with 91 open enrolled students on the third Friday count. So that's the regular education. Now Tara for the special ed.
Our 4K open enrollment in was quite a bit higher this year than last year.
Right, remember the 91 is just a new one,
Yes,
so we've got over 200 open.
total.
And in the world of special education, we do the opposite. We have 0 spaces for early childhood up through 12th grade. We've done that for the last few years with the 0 spaces. We do also have in our policy, if a student is open enrolled as a gen ed student, becomes eligible for special education services, we do return them to their home district. It's a common practice that districts do. Most districts have 0 spaces, and if they find a student eligible under open enrollment, they return them.
Additional information for the board would be the enrollment analysis. Historically, at this time, we would do a roll-up for projections for 26, 27. However, with the pending school closures, we don't yet know those specific numbers of how many kids are going to be located in each particular building and how the boundary determinations are made. So what we did was we just are keeping on with our same spreadsheet for the 25, 26 school year, just updated to reflect numbers as of, I think the latest one was 12/8. By the principals. And so you can see both the elementary numbers and then the middle school and high school numbers. The middle school numbers reflective of 12/15. So just wanted you guys to have this information. It's just looking a little different because it's not yet rolled up because of the school closures.
Mr. President?
Megan?
I've heard a few people ask questions about how open enrollment's going to work in the grade schools with the big changes, and I realize that might be a question mark, but as, you know, with our open enrollment, I think at some point it'd be helpful to see like how many of those students are currently in K through 5, or, you know, how is that going to work right now when we don't have the boundaries yet for new students who are requesting?
So new students, we don't determine those until May.
Okay.
So the application period, Tim Minor, correct me if I'm wrong, but typically we don't make placement determinations for elementary students until the end of May, early June. It's after we make our boundary exception placements. So once we determine not only our capacity at each of the 4 elementaries, then we look at boundary exception applications first, or in resident school or students, and then we look at what, if any of our elementaries have space for open enrollment. However, if they're currently placed in one of the 4 remaining open schools, they have the right to stay in that building. Mm-hmm. It's only any currently open enrolled students at Willow or Holton that would have to be reassigned, and that would be based on capacities at the remaining open schools.
So you were asking how it works by building. So MGT had this in their presentation. So open enrolled in are that line third bottom, so you can kind of see where our largest open enroll in is. And as Andrea said, students that are open enrolling in buildings that are closing, they would move into the regular open enrollment pool just like everybody else. The students that are currently in buildings that are not closing, the state law requires them to stay in their buildings regardless of elementary boundary changes.
Thank you. I felt like I had seen it, but I couldn't quite recall, so I appreciate that.
Yep.
Mr. President,
Aaron?
I want to go back, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. On the open enrollment, the 0 spaces for early childhood and 0 spaces for K through 12. So we're recommending no open for any of that?
When we say early childhood, we mean early childhood special education.
Okay. And then, just on the numbers, when we look at the numbers on that grid for the received versus attended, like it says 117, that says 7 denied, and then only 91 did only 91 show up because they looked elsewhere and ended up enrolling somewhere else? I just wanted to talk about that real quick.
And they don't have to give us a rationale.
Sure.
As to why they're not. Sometimes it's they didn't get the school they asked for.
Okay, but that's why the numbers don't add up.
But that's exactly
Okay.
why they don't match up. Yep, they have the final decision whether they want to, and often do apply to several school districts.
Other means, perfect. And then on that current enrollment projection that you have, I mean, is there like an ideal number? So when we look at having four elementary schools, is there an ideal number that we could come up with a grid on what we would expect the numbers to potentially look like, so we have a goal to work towards in the boundary? I know this maybe like crosses over some of the other things we're going to talk about, but is there a way that we could get some sort of this is what we would ideally like to see without putting anything out in stone, obviously, because
I think there's been some communication when they were originally considering, and Nick certainly, I think that was related in a document. I just don't remember exactly where that document is.
Yep, so, we're using our class size guidelines, 18 to
Yep.
22, K2, and then 22 to 27 and 3-5. All of the budgets or the number of sections we think we need are built around 20 kids in K2 and built around 25 kids in grades 3-5, average class size.
Yep, so what I'm asking is, can we get a grid that looks like this for potential, just so we have something for us board members to look at while we're doing boundary lines, to say, like, this would be our goal that we would be working towards? You know, so when the boundary lines, let's say there's a wonky line here, like, what does that do to those numbers? Like,
So are you talking about like a grid that just has the class size guidelines in them?
yeah, like this one. Like, does that make sense?
Aaron, do you mean, so like, for instance, Prairie is a 4-section school, so 4th grade for Prairie, we'd show 4 sections of 25 would be our ideal. Is that what you're getting at?
Yep.
Just show that for all the schools.
Well, I mean, just so when we're looking at it, we have a capacity to kind of go by. Like right now, we're looking at the capacity and all the numbers for the grades and how they're all divided out. I know there's a lot of, again, this kind of crosses over misinformation stuff at the same time. So I'm just trying to gain a little clarification on how many sections, when we look at it in a grid form, it looks really nice and it's easy to see. There's 4 sections here and we'll be able to fill those, and our ideal numbers would look like this, like once we shift people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, we can show you, basically, we can do this grid with the 4 remaining buildings and then basically put, 3 sections at every grade level for North Hudson, and then do 4 sections at every grade level for the other buildings. We can also set them up. You would have to tell us, do you want them set up with ideal or what we budgeted? Or, I mean, because we say ideal for 3rd through 5th is 22 to 27. That's what we say is our ideal. It's a range, not necessarily a specific number. And the same thing with K2. So if you want it, I mean, we can put together the grid. Basically, they're all going to have the exact same numbers in them. It's just one building will have 3 sections versus the other 3 buildings all have 4 sections per grade. Is that?
Yeah, with just the 4 remaining buildings.
The 4 remaining, because I don't think we're gonna know, we were just talking today in a meeting, we're not gonna know, is it 3 sections at Rivercrest or 4 sections at Rivercrest until the boundaries are determined.
Right, but we know we have the space for X amount of sections. That's what I'm kind of going towards.
Yeah, I mean, we can show you about, how many sections that we have allocated for each grade level. Is that what you're kind of thinking by building? Okay. Yeah, we can put that together. I mean, and again, it's basically 15 per grade level. It's the same because it's 3 4-section buildings and 1 3-section building. But, yes, we can absolutely put it in, and then we can say, capacity-wise, if we figure it at 27, high three grades, we can say, okay, for example, at Hudson Prairie, 4 sections of 27 would be 108 students would be our capacity at Hudson Prairie in 5th grade or 4th grade or whatever it is. And we're actually going to be at 85 students or something along those lines. You know, we can absolutely do that. That's not hard for us to do.
I just think it would make sense if, I mean, we're talking about moving roughly 400 kids between Holton and Willow, right?
Yeah, I mean, I
I
think,
mean, that's pretty close to that number. And so it would just be nice to be able to see, like, how are those 400 kids actually fitting into the 4 remaining buildings? That's what I'm trying to get at.
yeah, and we won't, until they give us like our first run at the boundaries, which will be probably in about 3 or 4 weeks.
Yep.
Then we'll be able, I mean, we would be able to put this matrix together with the 4 buildings once they give us some preliminary boundaries. So they would be able to, so if they give us, like, we'd be able to put this matrix together for boundary A, boundary B, and boundary C. But until then, we're guessing until they, so that way they'll be able to say, okay, we have 87 4th graders here, and we have 93 1st graders here. So we'll be able then to plug what their boundary thing is into a 4-building thing. We just don't have that information yet because they haven't started
Right.
changing the boundary.
Right.
But that's exactly what happens as part of the rebounding process, is you'll see exactly how many kids by grade level, by building, are being allocated. And then we'll also put on there how many sections we think we need to allocate, which then will come out to the average class size as well.
Okay, thank you.
Megan?
Not to be that person, but I think because it says 25, 26 projected right now, it's a little confusing. Maybe if it just said current, you know, as of, you know, and then there's the date up in the corner, that's making it feel a little wonky for my mind.
Okay.
Because it's like you were saying, normally you'd be doing projections by now, but we're not because
Because of the boundaries, yep.
so I think if it just said current,
I will go
that
in
would help.
there right now. And hopefully by the next time we're sharing the information, we're able to have those projections and have all that done, so. But yes, I will do that right now.
thank you.
Yep.
Okay. No other questions? We can move on to board parameters regarding boundaries.
All right, absolutely. So really, Tim will pull up a presentation. I did link it to the agenda for folks if you want to, if it's easier to follow along. Trying to walk through some boundary pieces with the board and guiding principles. If you remember, we're kind of, if you go to the next slide, Tim, the whole point of this is we want shared guiding principles. So these are kind of the guardrails that you put on the consultants as they start to build these things. It helps set the direction, and it ensures that we keep the first things first. Because as we've gone through this process before, there will be a lot of noise that comes around this process. There'll be a lot of people that'll, there can be people that can say, I want this or I want that, and make sure, you know, there are going to be a lot of levers. When you pull one lever, it's going to all of a sudden do something else. And so by putting these parameters in place, by the board setting these guiding principles, it helps us know that even if we have to make an adjustment here and it does something over here, it still falls within what you guys think is acceptable as we kind of work through it, through this process. If you go to the next slide. So this is a slide that MGT talked about. These were the 8 areas they talked about. We're actually going to talk about only 7 of them because the circle at the bottom, we don't need to talk about because we don't have feeder patterns because we all feed into one middle school, we all feed into one high school. And so these are kind of the 7 areas. If you go to the next slide, the 7 areas where we kind of need a direction or a statement from the board to kind of talk about what, when we think about transportation, what is a guiding principle of transportation, or minimizing the impact, or special populations, things along those lines, as they talk about this. On the next slide, what I did is, and we're going to roll through this, is, why we, just talk a little bit about why we need these, and then also making sure, some examples of what these look like. So it is going to be important because these are going to get shared with the community as they provide their feedback on both the 13th and the 27th. It's also what drives MGT for making their examples of different boundaries as we work through it. And it makes sure everybody understands that this is what the board's expectations are in your perspective, because the goal, and I think one of the consultants last week that talked about it, Lance talked about it, it's not about the loudest people in the room get their way. It's about making sure that we have these things that are set and that we go back to what the board's expectations are. Because in the end, the feedback that you get from the community through these two community meetings is just that, it's feedback. At the end of the day, the 7 people that sit up here are the ones that are gonna vote and say, this is where kids are gonna go to school, moving forward. So one of the things we're gonna do, we're gonna kind of break into 2 groups, because this shouldn't take very long. If you go to the next slide, Tim, is want you to, while you're talking about in your 2 groups, so we kind of have the 3 of you over here and the 4 of you over here, is to really to look at what are the 2 or 3, so there's multiple things that need to come, 2 or 3 most essential elements. So like kind of your number one things, all things, you know, being equal, or if we have to make some lever adjustments, these are the things that we think we have to take into account or carry more weight maybe than some of the other guiding principles. But also what we need to do is, what I'd like each group to do is just draft a one guiding principle per element. We don't want 20, we don't want 5, and we don't want paragraphs. So it's about keeping them nice, it's about keeping them values driven, you know, what you value as a group, and then we're gonna come together. If you go to the next slide, Tim, this is just an example. So for the transportation one, the guiding principle might be it's efficient and there are predictable routes, you know, as you're thinking about the boundaries. Or the avoid island zones one, you might say, yeah, areas need to be contiguous. So some of these are gonna be no-brainers. I would say the majority of them are gonna be kind of no-brainers as we continue to work through these things. But it will be important. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take about 15, 20 minutes as you kind of go through, talk through them, and then we're gonna come together as the full board and kind of share through, and we're gonna type these things up. It's not designed to be an extensive, like I said, paragraph about each one of these things. It's really very concise things that people, that the audience, when you think about, you might have 200 or 300 people at the meeting on the 13th, that they understand, oh yeah, the board said when we're evaluating these things against transportation parameter, they want, you know, they want efficient transportation routes, and they want, you know, predictive routes. It could be that you want the shortest bus routes possible, or the least amount of time kids are on the bus, you know, types of things as we work through that. So we're just gonna take, and if somebody in the group of 3 or group of, in about 15 minutes, and if we need a little bit more time, we will, but this will kind of break us up a little bit, as opposed to just 7 people trying to talk through every single one and kind of work it, because I got a feeling you guys are gonna come up with a lot of the same ones together. So, all right, we'll break into those 2 groups.
Can we just come around there?
Oh, as we kind of go through this, what we'll do is we'll have one group read their
Microphone.
first one.
Microphone.
Oh, sorry. All right, so as we do this, we'll have one group read their first, second group, and then we'll kind of collaborate to make sure we're hearing what people are saying. So when we think about transportation considerations or guiding principles, we'll start over here. What do you guys have?
I can do it. Transportation? Sorry, use budget dollars wisely while prioritizing minimizing bus time on the bus. Is it reasonable to get to 45 minutes max on the bus?
Okay.
Yes. Oh, let me clarify, 45 minutes each way. Yeah, thank you, Andrea.
Yeah, not total.
Yeah.
Okay, nicely. All right. What did this group have over here?
And we had minimize time on the bus, use logical safe stops for group pickups, and have efficiency with bus routes within those parameters. So very similar.
Do you guys want to have and you got to understand that even with the boundaries, they're not going to, we won't know what the exact time is on the buses until after we actually start running
Yes.
busing software. So I guess, looking at this, does number 1, minimize time on the bus, which I heard from both groups. I only heard from one group about logical, safe stops for group pickups. If people want that in there, don't want that in there. And then I did hear efficiency. It seemed like both want to be efficient. Is there anything what else?
I think for us, efficiency was around, Molly, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, it was around efficiency and within keeping within our budget, right? Because you could interpret efficiency as time or efficiency as money, and I do think we're looking for both and a balance of both. And I can endorse, I think you guys inherently do logical,
Yeah.
safe stops for group pickups and would continue to
I
endorse
wasn't
that.
hearing that from your statement.
Oh, thanks.
Seems not to be a concern.
We also meant efficiency in terms of the number of bus routes and the dollars spent. You know, we're not gonna, I don't want to add 20 bus routes, so it's 45 minutes total daily. That's-
So efficiency with time and dollars. Is that what I'm hearing both groups say?
Yes.
Yeah, I think balance, that's kind of what we talked about.
Balance.
Balance. Balance.
Okay, yeah.
Balance.
All right. And we'll come back to these one last time as we go through them. So minimizing the impact, or minimize impact. We'll start over here.
All right, it's a long sentence. We didn't follow the rules on this one. Students within walking distance of their current elementary school, you know, if it's one that's not closing, stay at that elementary school. It kind of runs into some of the other one. Keep neighborhoods together, planning long-term for boundaries so we don't have to change in the near future, and move the fewest number of kids to reset the boundaries within the other parameters regarding efficiency and long-term population projections. So it gets long and repetitive a little bit. It's drafting.
So students within walking distance attend those schools, move the fewest number of students to set the longest term boundaries? Or
Yeah, it's,
to accomplish the,
we need to plan long-term for the boundaries so we don't have to change them, but, you know, within that parameter, move the fewest number of students. You know, like,
I think, right, our example was maybe if there's an area that has a large amount of land that might sell in the next 5 to 10 years, that we take that into account when we're doing boundaries, so that maybe we have extra room in that area, because that might change instead of,
room for growth.
exactly.
and the current homes they know are being built and that kind of stuff.
Okay. And I know that was something that we had done, even when we reset the boundaries in 18, we moved a lot of students out of the Rivercrest attendance boundary, because that was where our growth was gonna happen, and that's where developments were scheduled to go, and we did get developments, we just didn't get the growth. Okay, so we'll work through that. All right, this side.
For minimize impact, we said keeping neighborhoods together and protecting students from frequent moves. So kind of making sure we're creating boundaries that will last for at least 8 years would be great. We'd like to see that happen again.
So long-term boundaries, and we could say 8 years.
I mean, yeah, I was, sorry.
It's okay. I like that the company that came in here, the MGT, said 10 to 12 years was what their goal was.
And that's looking at what they said is kind of a static, because our community
Yep.
yeah.
And we're at like about 7 right now from the last time we did this, just.
Yeah, which is pretty good.
Yep.
So maybe instead of room for growth, accounting for growth in certain areas.
Yes.
Hopeful will come.
All right, special populations over here.
The first one is ensuring equitable access to educational services across all schools. And then the second one is considering prioritization for special ed students in the boundary exception process.
So.
Can you say that second part again, Brian?
Yeah, consider prioritizing special ed students when we're looking at boundary exceptions. So we were talking about in our group, hearing from families that are concerned about their teacher is going to end up at this school and they want to be able to follow their teacher because their child is really attached and works well with that teacher. So we wanted to think about whether there's a way to have a special process for boundary exceptions for special ed families.
And, I mean, we can definitely revisit the boundary exception board policy and change the order in which or the criteria, because there's, I think, 6 or 7 criteria that we apply. And if that's something the board wants to do, I don't know if that necessarily would be part of how we set boundaries in general.
Andrea, I think you would like to speak.
I think, and I was just, with Tara too, we were just saying the timeline can be a little wonky, because if we have the boundary development that occurs in, before February with the finalization, we do all our staffing on the basis of that. We put our special ed teachers based on where the kids are going to be located. If then we have boundary exceptions that upset that, would be potentially a little problematic, is what I was thinking off the top of my head.
And I think being careful of not letting parents pick their teachers, we're very careful about that. So we may have 5 special ed teachers at a building. I don't want a parent to think that they boundary accept to that building that they get a certain teacher, because after we know where kids are, we will caseload factor, and then we will base caseloads based on teachers to make sure everybody has an equal amount of kids. And naturally kids move, we may have a teacher who does K1 in a certain type of disability category and a teacher who does 3-4. So it'd be really hard to say, yep, that teacher will have all 3rd graders, students with autism, being that specific.
So I'm just going to quickly add that we expect your input. Jump right in anytime you want to. Okay. Maria.
Yeah, I would echo Bob's statement. I mean, you guys are, you are experts and you're the administrators, and I want to absolutely respect that. I think as we were talking about this, the topic is special populations and thinking about goals, guiding principles for special populations. And the special population we kept bumping back on was special ed kids. And that is something that we keep hearing about from families, is how are we supporting, listening to, hearing those kids. And so I think it's just going to continue to come up, and kind of just all of us continue to focus and say, how are we considering those needs in this conversation, and how we do maybe a little extra here or there, whatever that looks like, and making sure that's really clearly communicated and invited to, and invitations are sent to those families. So that was my intent and my goal with this, is just, if we're talking about a guiding principle for special populations, it is the special ed community here, and hearing and supporting them.
Thanks. I just wanted to pretty much, Maria said it much more eloquently than I will say it, but I think we understand that the model that we have is to educate all kids in their home school and in their new home school. But I think it's important to have that, how does that work? You know what I mean? How would that work? Or how do we talk about this? If we're prioritizing special ed kids who, maybe this is going to be not just nerve-wracking, it's going to be really difficult. So I think that's kind of what, Maria was saying. How do we do that? I don't know. You know, and same thing that Maria said, that absolute respect for you guys, that you're the professionals, and just because a parent really likes a teacher at X school does not mean that teacher at Y school is not awesome as well. So it's just a really hard to navigate in my mind to balance those things. So that's where that's coming from.
Mr. President?
And I think a lot will have to do with staffing as we're looking at those teachers with certain disability categories that they have strength with. We know that we're going to spread them apart, so those students that are, used to receiving specific services from certain teachers will end up in buildings to make sure we have a whole continuum of services for those students to receive their services. So I think that'll come out naturally through the staffing process too.
And not to nerd about process, but I'm going to do it. So we talked about this a little bit in our group too, and then we were we'd be like, okay, well, that's not actually a thing for MGT to talk about. That's a thing for the district and for us to have a conversation about how we're going to deal with it with our policies or what working groups are working on. Because MGT is not going to figure that out for us, right? Not that it doesn't matter to talk about it, but in my mind, I kept having thoughts where I was like, no, these consultants aren't doing that for us. That's district work. But I do think they're important questions, and understanding to me the timeline of how things work, because that's all kind of theoretical in my mind. I don't know exactly how you guys do it is very helpful. So how do we take these things into account while also considering the timeline as it happens, so we are ready to go on day one is important.
And I think you guys are working on the guiding principles right now. And as we shared before, we have our own guiding principles as we're dealing with the staffing. And certainly student-centered decision-making is a priority. And complying or honoring our strategic planning as well. And we've been having the conversations, as Tara said, that we're being very thoughtful to not have the placements of our teachers before we know the boundaries, before we know the locations of the kids. And so I think they're all gelling together. It's just, step by stepping it too. But yeah, the guiding principles are very important as we continue to make those decisions.
Okay.
And
Mr. President, I think that your topic of conversation was one thing that we noted in our elements. So ours was that each school should, and I think we already do, but ensure that all of our staff, and some probably more so than others, are trained in special ed. And so that if they go to whichever school they may go to, they have the best and the brightest special ed teachers. And I know some people might be gifted in one spot and some are gifted in others, but I think all of them should have that baseline of education to know how to work with students that are special, and I'm special, they definitely are.
One other thing with the special populations, it's not a big deal in our district, as we were talking about, as much as some other districts, but just to keep in mind the free and reduced price lunch populations, and so that we're not, making one school. We don't have a high share of free and reduced price lunch in our district in general, and we want to keep neighborhoods together, but it's just another thing to throw in the mix, because that is a probably easier to predict thing possibly than some other special population.
Mr. President?
Maria?
Molly.
Or Molly.
Third one gets it. What you said, Andrea, about being student-centered, and the things that you said, I was like, yeah, put that up there. They're the same thing, student-centered. So no matter who the student is. So that's good. Thank you.
So again, we just want to make sure we understand the task is giving them parameters to move lines on a map. And so you just have to remember when we're talking about things like actual providing services, things along those lines, those conversations will come. They're just not this conversation. And this conversation is really about where the lines, what are the parameters as far as moving the lines on the map. And, and I think that's the piece we have to kind of keep in mind as we work through this. I think, we do know where certain areas in our district are that are either rent-controlled housing or subsidized housing, things like that. So when we talk about specialized populations, we can try to look at some of those things as we try to balance those things. Even ensuring equitable access to educational services across all schools, again, is not necessarily a statement for somebody trying to set a boundary. Could be, to the best of our ability, try to balance the buildings, specialized populations in the buildings to where we have access to.
I wonder if it's twofold, try to the best of ability, try and balance special education and free and reduced lunch populations across the buildings or something. Because I agree with what Megan said earlier about like, how do we do that while preserving everything's in balance, right? It's how to the best of their ability. Yeah.
I think special ed is going to be a harder thing to predict, I would imagine. I mean, we know where special ed students are now, but I mean, but we do know where lower income housing or subsidized housing might be. At the same time, we want to minimize the impact and keep students at their schools and keep neighborhoods together. And so just because it's a lower income neighborhood doesn't mean I want to split a line down the middle and say, oh, we're going to split you up so you're not at school together. Well, that's a crappy idea. So a lot of these things butt up against each other in my mind.
And prior to the boundary reset that occurred in 1819, we did have some of our lower socioeconomic neighborhoods divided. And that was quite problematic because we had like one apartment complex that could go to 4 different elementaries. And so that was always a grave concern of us in administration, and we sought to change that. So then I'd hate to see that undone. And those people across the hallways would go to different elementaries, and that was problematic.
So if we said something like, try to balance to the best of ability, given the other. Given the other parameters, given no island zones or neighborhood areas or, given all those things, we'll try to look at that. I have to look and see, I know we sent data files to RSP, but I'm not sure if we sent them a data file that also included certain state identifiers. Because it wasn't until just recently when we started seeking permission from families to be able to utilize free reduced lunch data and data collection that before we didn't even know who those students were. There were like 2 people in the district that could identify which children happened to be on free or reduced lunch. And so we've changed that sense so that we could look at it as a subgroup to try to see other things that we could do as a district different. But I have to see if we've even given them that attribute. Otherwise, what'll happen is they'll have to then get us a list of names, and then we'll have to look at the names, and then we'll have to pull those things ourselves to even try to balance some of those things out. But again, when you try to do things, as somebody said, like about special education or ELL or some of these specialized populations, it's really hard because those kids move in and out and families moving out. It's different when you have larger urban districts that have very distinct zones within their district that are identified as, generationally something over and over and over again. That's just not us for Hudson.
Nick, could we be I hate to be a stick on this, but when you're saying like other parameters, could you just define that a little bit better? So if we come back to this for any reason, we're not asking what parameters you were talking about in that area?
Well, I would just say.
On number 3, where you just
Yep.
type that
I mean,
in
we
there,
could
the ability
say
given
for
the other
the-
parameters, could you just
Could I say,
name,
given the other guiding principles?
There you go.
Yes.
A caveat on transportation, I didn't speak up earlier, but some of the longest routes are secondary. That wouldn't be impacted by the closures. So reducing the routes to 45 minutes may be additional costs in terms of additional bus routes.
All right. Number 4, just back over here for first go.
Can I just respond to that? I wasn't even thinking about how this relates to like middle school or high school. You know, I was thinking about how it relates to the elementary boundaries. So are we supposed to be thinking about that when we do this?
No, I
Okay.
just wanted, those longer routes are definitely, and we tend to pair the routes
Yep.
with elementary whenever possible, but that typically the hour routes are secondary.
I was worried I was failing the assignment.
Oh, no,
had
I
to
just want to
double
make
check.
sure
Okay.
that you guys had that information, that's all.
It could be that we end up with a different look. I mean, we have, like Andrew said, you know, bus 269 comes through our neighborhood as an elementary bus, comes through our neighborhood as a high school, middle school bus. It might not be that's the case anymore. It might be two very different routes for bus 269 next year, you know, based on what's the most efficient route to go about it.
Nick, I'm sorry. Before we move on to natural boundaries and major roads, I guess I'm, given the conversation here, not to just stall us on special populations, but kind of just reflecting on the conversation, so much of what we talked about really isn't necessarily boundary related. It's, and I wonder, is it even a topic that should be on here for a guiding principle? I almost feel like kind of like the feeding things, feeding whatever feeder routes, we're
Could be
just saying,
removed.
I would actually propose we remove it because we're just saying on the whole, balance the neighborhoods and everything. And Kate, your point is well taken. Like all of our teachers, we staff to have excellent teachers who can support all of our students. And the other committees are going to be working very closely with families and continuing to communicate with them and support them. And so they understand how this transition will help. That's just where my mind's bumping right now. I feel like it should be removed.
I was thinking the same thing because it's like, kind of think about this after every other thing.
So Maria, are you saying remove number 3 entirely?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just feels like everything that we keep talking about with regards to, like, I understand MGT gave us these areas because they use this when they work and they work with a variety of districts in a variety of locations that have things. I don't know. I would need examples of what other boards would do in regards to this. And right now, I think based on this conversation, it's not about how you draw a line on a map that is important about special populations. It's other work that you guys are doing in other committees. So.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I agree
Upon
as well.
reflection.
Okay, so we will,
Does that eliminate what we just talked about as being important over there, Andrea, with the buildings and the not dividing the apartments? I mean, because
I
that was
don't think
kind
so.
of part of that conversation.
Because I think keeping neighborhoods together would be something that would.
That would fall under that?
That
Is
would
that
fall
what
under,
you're-
yes.
Okay, I just want to be very clear about that because we were just talking about this all under the same number
Yep.
3.
Yep.
Okay.
all right, number 4, over here. Natural boundaries and major roads.
Our response was yes.
All right, over here, you guys have a little more in depth?
Yes,
Yes.
but use those to create efficiency and keep neighborhoods together.
Okay.
Better.
It's okay.
Sounds like you put a little more. We were like
I just felt like you can't just
River,
write yes.
94
We were
hot spots. What do we do? Yeah.
Okay. All right, number 5, avoiding island zones. And this goes back to kind of what people had said, so 5 starts over here.
Well, yes. Yeah, avoid them as much as possible, but maybe consider I'd imagine there's some amount of, it just seems so hard because it's like, how many kids are in 4th grade in a neighborhood versus 3rd grade? I can't even imagine trying to do this. I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. But considering the current projections for housing developments, you know, if there's one house there right now and they're building 25 others, I don't know, I guess 25 is not enough to matter. So let's just avoid the islands. Let's just stay yes. Sorry, everyone.
Well, if it was, I guess there are some that we would probably want to take into account. You know what I mean? So if you had a development of 100 houses, it's 0.33, right? Or
It's
per-
.135 for elementary.
0.135. Math it up for me.
So 13.5 kids on 100 houses.
Okay, so it's not gonna be a huge impact even with a larger development of 100.
I would think that busing would come into play, like an efficient busing route when you have that situation where there's an island, like, is it efficient to send this person way over there versus like, this is the closest one, even though they're the only pocket, they're the only one or 5 houses that are over here, and there's no development, you don't see any development, like, it doesn't make sense to just clump it together and say, because that's what we did the last time, that's what was done 7 years ago, everything was kind of clumped together, there were not island pockets, and it all got swifted, it was like everything, example, south of 94 got shifted this way, even though there was one pocket over here that made much more sense, busing, time, and everything to go to a different school. That was me.
So do you mean, if you're in an island, you should go to the school that's closest to your island?
That's what I would think.
Yeah, I mean, that seems to make sense to me. And then you'd also be closer to the other kids who are somewhat close to your island.
Well,
But when we say island, do we mean like everyone around them's going to Rivercrest and then we're taking this one house and we're sending them to EP Rock? Is
well,
that
it's,
what you
it's,
mean?
it's not just houses, it would be like, okay, so you have the district owned property, right? And there's, hopefully eventually it's gonna get annexed and houses are gonna develop there. But you would wanna create a boundary that if that's within EP Rock's attendance boundary, which it currently is, that there's enough room within EP Rock that if that gets fully developed out, that they would all go to EP Rock, and it wouldn't all of a sudden be that, wow, we don't have enough room at EP Rock, so that group or that subdivision, instead of going to EP Rock, is now gonna go to Hudson Prairie, or now, I mean, it's to eliminate current islands and to eliminate future islands. So it is, you know, based on some of the, development maps, they're saying, okay, we want to take some of those things into consideration. So for example, if EP Rock's new attendance boundary is in an area that's primarily all built out, it's almost all built out, there's no real room for development, you could probably push that boundary to a little bit higher capacity versus, let's say, a large portion of Rivercrest boundary is not built out, and that's where development's gonna go, you would keep that building a little bit less capacity so that as more houses come online in that area and the potential more kids, they can just go there, they don't have to go to a different school.
Nick, that sounds kind of like a if that happens.
Yeah, that's the way all of these would be.
I mean, so would we, I don't know, it would kind of be nice for those few situations that we're gonna have there, if there is no current development going on in those areas, wouldn't it make more sense to just allow those families to have a choice and say, hey, you're one house over here, do you have a preference? Because really, at the end of the day, one kid in any school, even if they have one kid or 2 kids in different grades, isn't gonna make any difference to us here. It's gonna make a huge difference to that family, I'll tell you that.
It just could be it could be a busing issue for us, so, because that, you know, that family right now may say, oh, I don't want transportation, and then they sell their house to another family that does want transportation, and then, I mean, we typically don't, when we have the boundary exception process, which they could say, I don't want to go here, I want to go here if there's room, but we typically don't give boundary choice and bus, like, we wouldn't allow just individual families to pick. That's kind of why we have some of the issues we have on the north side of the district and the south side of the district with our actual district boundaries, because back when they consolidated school districts 40, 50 years ago, they gave the landowners the opportunity, do you want to go north, do you want to go south? And that's why you see these real jagged district lines. And it creates well, it still creates issues for us 40 years later, because you can't move those lines without both districts saying yes to it. So it's kind of the same thing. We probably wouldn't just look at a specific house. We would say, if that's the house that should go to Rivercrest or should go to Rock, then we would try to figure out what is the path of all the land that's between there, so we don't end up with that.
Would we be making any, I mean, potentially any exemptions for people who are in that situation that would want to drive their kids to school and not have them on the bus route? Not talking about future families selling houses, not selling houses. That's diving off the deep end if you ask me.
That's our boundary exception, that literally is our boundary exception process.
So we will allow some of that.
Yeah, that's what
Depending upon
Andrea was
enrollment,
talking
yeah.
about earlier. That's the boundary exception
Okay.
process. You guys have board policy related to it. Given space, we won't overload other buildings because people want to go there. But yes, that will still follow our normal boundary exception process. And if you do go on a boundary exception, you don't qualify for transportation.
So can will we be reviewing that policy before this comes up? Or could we plan to have just read the policy so it's out there and clear for people before we start the whole boundarying? So the policy's there?
We can always push it out. I think our timeline too, and actually Tim and I have to talk about this coming up, is that the reapplication period, because we require reapplication every year, is going to be coming up. Typically, I think, Tim, it's end of February when it opens up. March 1st.
Could we
We're
move that up?
What?
Could we move that up so we can look at that policy before we?
We can
do
look
that?
at it. I don't think we want to open it up necessarily
Sure.
earlier because of the other variables. But yeah, we can always pull up the board policy.
That would be appreciated.
I have, Mr. President? So my understanding was on the 13th, on the 27th, the MGT will be here and that parents will have opportunities to weigh in on some of those things. Like, okay, you placed me at X school, but I almost feel like our neighborhood should be at Y school. You know, so some of those things may be solved through that process. People are going to have an opportunity to, parents are going to have an opportunity to give their input prior to any need for a boundary exception process, correct?
Yes, they'll have that. I mean, there's not a guarantee that because they don't want their neighborhood moved or because they do want their neighborhood moved, that they're going to get what they want. But
Right.
there is, if overwhelmingly, we have 3 different models, right, that MGT comes up with or 4, and the feedback on model B is overwhelmingly negative. There's nobody that has anything good, positive, and there's nothing that they can do to it to make it positive. They may say, okay, coming back on the 27th, we've eliminated Model B because there was so much negative feedback about Model B. And we've made these tweaks to Model A and Model C and Model D, type of thing. But I think we've got to be very careful because we are talking about setting the fixed boundaries. And you need to set fixed boundaries before you start setting exceptions to your fixed boundaries. And so when we went through this process, last time, yes, they set the boundaries and then the boundary exception process, I believe, then we went through a full board review of that process to really tie it down compared to where it was before. And that's something that the board can absolutely discuss. I just want to caution the board that if you try to have that discussion while you're trying to cite elementary boundaries, you are going to confuse the heck out of people, I believe. Because people are going to be like, I'm not understanding are you going to have more boundary exceptions? And I think the other thing is you have to understand that there might only be a handful of spots available in boundary exceptions based on the number of where we're running at capacity. So I would hate to give people a false sense of, all you gotta do is put in for a boundary exception, it's automatically gonna get granted because, we've been able to do it in the past. We've had a lot of open space in the past, that's why we've been able to grant a lot of them.
That was why I was asking if we could just read the policy.
Yeah.
And share the policy number so people could just look it up on their own.
Yep, yeah, we'll get it out. But I mean, as far as avoiding island zones, this statement here, consider future growth and population projections and setting the boundaries to avoid islands. Does that seem? Okay. The next one, 6, which starts over here on the right, neighborhood schools / neighborhood considerations. I think this group had some comments.
Yeah, we talked about possibly renaming this away from neighborhood schools since we don't have neighborhood schools. We have more community regional schools or just, like as Nick said, maybe neighborhood considerations. And our only goal was keep neighborhoods together as much as possible.
This side?
Yeah, I like the neighborhood considerations. I don't know anyone else, but they also said keep neighborhoods together and avoid splitting down the middle of the street sort of stuff, which is the same thing, but just an example of that.
Would people like to go to neighborhood considerations instead of neighborhood schools? So it's more about moving groups of kids or keeping groups of kids together more than it is about, even prior to closing bill, even currently, we don't necessarily have technically neighborhood schools. We have regional schools, but
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
yeah. So neighborhood considerations, keep neighborhoods together as much as possible, avoid splitting down the middle of the street. Okay? Capacity and utilization, coming over here to the left, Bob's side.
He kept
No.
starting on the right.
Oh, they were always the odd, or they were always the evens. You guys were always the odds. You guys were the first group to go. Well, apparently.
All right, well, we're glad we've made Kate happy now. So,
You got one more than they did to start with. You got 4 out of the 7.
she's tired of hearing me talk. It's probably part, or maybe you like it. I don't know. You like when I'm talking. Anyway.
Number 7.
Equitable class sizes across the 4 elementary schools that fall within our current class size guidelines, which will result in efficient staffing, which is, obviously the staffing is ours, but that's part of why we're doing this.
Okay. What'd this say?
Is it okay, Brian, if I go? Sorry. Balance school capacity amongst all grade schools over time. Magically.
Okay. And you have to understand the balancing the capacities. We do have one elementary that's a one section smaller building, so it's just, and it could be, percentage utilization or something along those lines. What about keeping class sizes within the average or within the class size guidelines? Or keeping average class sizes within class size guidelines? Okay, I just, no,
That's what we said with the
I just-
equitable class sizes
That's what we meant.
amongst the schools.
That is within the class school guidelines. We don't have the current averages way lower one place than the other.
okay, all right. So, as we kind of recap these. So going all the way back to number 1. And this is, you guys are happy with it, thumbs down if you're not happy with it, and thumbs the sideways like I don't even know what you're talking about.
Before we start, here again, I'm encouraging, don't be afraid to tell us what you think.
Okay, so transportation, minimize the time on the bus, logical, safe stops for group pickups, and efficiency with both time and dollars, seeking balance.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Minimizing impacts. With students within walking distance, attend those schools, move the fewest number of students to accomplish the boundary adjustment, set long-term boundaries, parentheses, 10 to 12 years, accounting for growth in certain areas.
I have just a comment. I didn't really think of it till now. Students within walking distance attend those schools. That one I think is a little fraught, or a little difficult, because you could be within walking distance, but you have a highway to cross. And what does walking distance mean? You know what I mean? So,
Yep, so walking distance for us is within a mile, but it's also a safe in a mile. So
Okay.
we already take those into consideration. Certain roads, we don't expect kids to cross.
so they will be on the bus anyway. Anyway, so, but within a mile is basically what we're saying. So would that be clear to say students within a mile?
Students who fall within our current walking distance policy.
I'm just not even sure if you really need the first part before the first comma, because we're gonna set new walking zones based on the elementaries and the new boundaries. And that'll be part of the safe routes and all those other components. So, for example, there may be some kids that are currently going to Willow that may be within walking distance to Hudson Prairie when the boundaries reset. So,
we can cut
could-
that then. I think that's.
But I mean, what I'm hearing you guys say is move the fewest number of students to accomplish the boundary adjustments to try to get the 10 to 12-year bound, essentially a 10 to 12-year duration, but also making sure we're accounting for potential growth down the road. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it's just based on, and that's what they try to go off of. Okay.
On the, the question came up, I saw online about North Hudson, that there was like the fear that there would be some walkers from North Hudson that would be switched to a different elementary, and I can't, for the life of me, think of a scenario where that would happen. So I think it's more about,
No.
the common sense.
Tim, can you switch to the one that's live, the live document? Yeah. Instead of slide mode? It doesn't update. There we go. Okay, so moving the fewest number of students to accomplish the boundary adjustment, set long-term boundaries, 10 to 12 years, accounting for growth in certain areas. Thumbs up if you guys are okay with it. Thumbs down, okay. Number 3, we talked about special populations, striking it. I believe we already had consensus on that, but just want to make sure, is everybody still okay with striking that? All right. 4, natural boundaries and major roads. Use the natural barriers and major roads to create efficiency in setting boundaries and keeping neighborhoods together. Are you guys okay with that? All right. Avoiding island zones. Consider future growth and population projections and setting boundaries to avoid islands. Okay. Number 6, striking neighborhood schools and calling them neighborhood considerations, which is keep neighborhoods together as much as possible, avoid splitting down the middle of the street. Okay. And then capacity and utilization, balance school capacity amongst all grade levels over time, keeping average class sizes within district class size guideline. Okay.
I have another.
Make it,
Okay.
we're so
Oh,
close. We
this
were like
M
this
wins
close.
over that M. When we say keep average class size within class size guidelines, that's, I understand that every once in a while there will be one that goes one above or whatever. Is that why we're saying it that way? Instead of saying keep classes within class size guidelines?
Well, I think the, keep the average, because we tend to look at average class sizes at the buildings. So it may be that, as we look at it, so for example, 81 kids in second grade, that would be 4 sections, 4 sections of 20, or 3 sections of 20, 1 of 21, right? But then when they go to third grade, that would be 3 sections of 27, which would be within the class size guidelines. So it's just when we start to look at, when they start drawing these boundaries, going back to kind of what Aaron was saying with that chart, we'll start looking at those charts to make sure that there's nothing that's really odd based on the boundary that we can't accommodate. Like all of a sudden we have 7 sections of first grade and only 2 sections
Yeah.
of fifth grade.
Right.
So we try to keep within balance.
And maybe,
Keeping an average and then dividing that from class sizes within the district guideline.
and
Is
maybe,
that what we're saying?
and Aaron just said next to me a second ago, current class size guidelines, which kind of gets at the concern people have that it's all gonna shift around.
Well, we just said district class size guidelines, but if you want current,
I think we should have current.
I agree.
Current district class size guidelines, because I think people are worried that that might change.
Bonnie, please.
I don't think this is anybody's intent, but I know it was a question out there, was that keeping houses, there was a rumor that if you had a first grader, they could go to Willow and not Willow, go to North Hudson, and then a third grader would go to a different school, which I don't think was on anybody's radar, but do you want to clarify, just say households all kids would go to one school?
I think we should do that.
Because I think that was out there.
Does that fall under the board discussion though about misinformation that we're gonna talk
That
about
could be.
next? So kind of like a point of order thing,
Okay,
like just to keep it all this clean.
okay.
it does fall under number 6, keep neighborhoods and families together. Well, that would be keep families together.
If you're keeping neighborhoods together, you're gonna keep families together.
I think if you do that, you have to have a separate, keep families together, and then keep neighborhoods together as much as possible, not keep families and neighborhoods together as much as possible. So they're two separate things.
I agree.
Yeah, because you don't want to say keep families together as much as possible. It's, I
Right.
mean,
Like
we
there's
draw the
some-
boundary.
It
It's
is a
their
true
house
statement.
goes- Yeah, I mean, their house, yeah. So, I mean, their house goes within that boundary. I guess, you know, that would be, the question is, I mean, the only time that's maybe not the case is when somebody does a boundary exception. The only, but I mean, that's, if you go to the school in which you are within the elementary attendance boundary, you're guaranteed to go to the school in which the boundary you live. Even if that throws our class sizes above the averages. I mean, we don't, let's say, well, we have enough room for your first and third grader, but your fifth grader's gotta go over here. We don't do that. We've never done that. Now, if we're talking about boundary exceptions, which is a totally different process and not part of this process, then I just think, if you point that one piece out, people are gonna say, do you mean that with boundary exceptions also? Because right now, we tell people with boundary exceptions very upfront that, sorry, we have space for your kindergartner and your second grader, but there's no space for the fourth grader.
I
For a
think-
boundary exception.
I think it would just be good for maybe at the beginning, when MGT lays things out, for them to know when they draw boundaries, they're boundaries for K-5, or I guess for K-5, I don't know if they're for K-5 now, I don't
I
know.
would just say K-5.
K-5. So families are inherently kept together within their homeschool, within their boundary. That's just what happens.
Yeah, I don't know if that's really that's not really a guiding principle how to draw the lines, because the lines are gonna get drawn.
I would agree with Aaron. I think it's part of, we address it in the misinformation, and we have already, and I think we keep it there, and it is just neighborhoods are kept together. And
As much
yeah,
as
I
possible.
just reduce confusion. It just, this is. So,
Sounds good.
Mr. President, I had
Yes, Molly.
one last comment that it's just a personal, I don't know if you guys agree with this. I think we're gonna have changing patterns of growth, but when we use growth in here, I think it feels a little bit like we're saying, oh, we're gonna grow. So anytime counting for growth in certain areas, and then we
Counting for
say,
variation.
Should we say
consider
development?
future growth.
Should we say accounting for
Current
development in certain
developments,
areas?
Like the current developments is what I would go based on. Like if it's not currently being developed, how do we know when that's gonna happen? Like if we see houses that are being built, that would be, or there's land contracts for that development, I think that would be a good consideration. Otherwise, who knows who's gonna do what with what property, and 20
and-
years later, they still haven't done anything with it.
We're talking about development or growth in certain areas, but we're also talking about decline.
So we could say
So there's kind of
variation.
variation.
Should we say demographic projections? Because we also know where babies, 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds are, and so maybe it's,
Kind of.
Right, because the hotspots, we know, were in that span east-west of Rivercrest. That will change at some point. Those kids will move up and be in high school, and then the hotspot will be some other place. So I don't want to ever confuse people that we're somehow like, oh, look there's future growth, you know?
So accounting for known enrollment variations?
Well, I was
Under
just
number
going
5
based off
too.
of the MGT, where they said for every 100 houses, there's approximately 14 kids that come out of it. So when I'm looking at that, I'm going, okay, well, if there's houses that are being developed and there's 100 houses here, or 50 houses here, we should be able to estimate, we might get X amount of kids from that. I think that's fair to consider that, because you might, if you got 100 houses going up and you don't accommodate for those 14 kids,
I think Molly's right though, because there's fewer kids than there currently are. So it's considering population projections and setting the
I think we
boundaries.
need to be careful to not over scrutinize on how many kids people are or are not going to have, to be honest.
No, I just mean from the data MGT has.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. That's why I was
What was
sticking
your
with the.
potential change to that, Nick, again, was consider?
I just put accounting for known enrollment variations, but
I'm
that's,
fine with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that on number 5, you're gonna change that?
well, that was on 2, and then avoid
Known
considering,
growth instead of future growth, consider known growth and population projections.
Or just known change or variation.
I like the enrollment variations and
consider known enrollment variations and population projections and setting boundaries.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
We didn't even need ChatGPT on that, guys.
Yeah.
No, we don't need Kate for that.
She'll be fine with it. The job scribe.
All right, so, we'll get these, we'll get these things, we've gone through, we've done the sideways, the thumbs up, thumbs down, we've gone through that. So kind of closing this up, we'll get these things posted online, we'll get them cleaned up, we'll get them posted online. We'll get these to the consultants right away. What questions does the board have kind of from this point? Well, just in general, do you guys have any questions on where we're at and where we're going? I mean, so, related to boundary setting.
Brian?
I think my question is about timeline over the next month and a half here, kind of closing out this month. What is MGT doing? When will we get first see data from them? Then, I think our next meeting is the first week of January. Is that off the top of my head?
Yep.
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 Just sort of, if you could talk through kind of roadmap the next 6 weeks or so.
Yeah, so, your next meeting is the 12th, the community meeting's on the 13th. So I'll follow up with MGT, yet this week in talking through some of this stuff. One of the things that they will, be sending us, sometime, if not by the end of this week, but by, middle of next week, during break, is potentially starting to get some preliminary looks at things so that we can get a first look and say, okay, hey, just FYI, you have created an island here because based on something that you may not know about our district, we just need to make sure we're on the same page with this. So we'll start to have those discussions. I have a planned meeting with them on January 6th to discuss the presentation, the final format with that, and to run through everything, kind of a dry run to know how that's going to go. I will talk to them about whether or not the boundaries would be something that, like the different examples, 3 or 4 different boundary examples, would be kind of unveiled during that night meeting, if that's typically what they do, or if they would want those posted ahead of time. I'll ask them what they're, kind of what they've done in the past and what works best. And then we'll kind of go from there. And then, then we will have the board meeting, I believe it is on, so we're on the 12th and the 26th. So we'll have a board work session on the 26th, I believe, and then we'll have the community boundary meeting on the 27th, the next night. So we'll be able to kind of talk through, here's some feedback, this is kind of a direction we're heading, and as we gear up for that last push on the 27th to get some additional feedback. The goal is then, after their final set of feedback, that they're coming with, kind of a final set of recommendation to the board for the February 9th meeting, which is 2 full weeks after that. So as to what that's going to look like, and we'll kind of roadmap that out. And the board might say, we want to see these tweaks or these different things, and so it might get delayed a little bit, but that's kind of the path forward. They're kind of anxious to get these guiding principles so that they can kind of start moving the boundaries around and give us some preliminary stuff to look at, just to make sure there's nothing glaring that we would see having a better handle on the district than an outside consultant.
I have a question
Megan.
that's related, but not on the agenda, so maybe has to be for our meeting on the 12th. But as we think about 4K enrollment and how that's gonna open up at the beginning of February, right? Is that when enrollment opens?
We're doing it in March.
Okay, okay. So we pushed it off so that people
Yep.
can just say, I want to go to my school that I'm assigned to.
Yes, so that we
Okay.
have boundaries set, then we'll do enrollment,
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, I have a question.
registration, I
I
should say.
also don't know if this is the place to ask it, so if it's not, just tell me. So you asked if we had any questions about MGT or for them, and so I'm just kind of curious at what they see when they look at that development property on UU. Do they see that as $350,000 homes? Or do they see it as $500,000 to $700,000 homes? So we kind of have a projection of kids that are coming out of there that match what they were saying, the 14 kids per 100. And does the secondary question is, does Derek, who currently has that, agree with that as well? Like, is that where we're sitting? It kind of like goes together, but that could be a big difference in the number of kids and families that actually move in there. That would, 350,000 would be affordable housing. So I don't know if that's
Yeah,
a
and,
different conversation here.
well, a couple things. One, I think Derek has kind of told us their new entry point is more around the 450 range plus. That it's real hard for them to build anything for under that. I think when they came and spoke with us, probably about 9 months, 12 months ago.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been
And
part
it
of
seems
that.
like it's climbing every year. So, so I don't think any of that is necessarily going to, I mean, it's, the average new home being built in our district is well over $500,000, single
Very
family.
aware.
Yeah, so I think that's where and the other piece with it is, we still don't have it sold yet and annexed in. I mean, we have the plot laid out, but there's been obviously some pushback on some of those things. But, related to the boundaries, I don't think, they've already taken into account 700 roughly housing units that are either approved for development or part of those, including that, and they've already taken those things into consideration as part of their numbers.
So do they agree then with what you're saying now is that Derek is saying more like 450, and I thought that originally that, again, this might be a totally different conversation for another time. So if we need to move that, we can move that. But I wasn't here 9 months ago.
Yep,
Neither were two other people.
yep,
So when that conversation happened, it was my understanding that the whole reason we actually went with Derek Construction is because had said they were aiming for that $350,000 on those pieces to help bring kids into the district, and that's part of what we've had going on here. So I'm just a little confused. I know there's inflation and $100,000, but are we talking about 350, or are we talking about, if we're saying 450, why not 550? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, where's that number?
I think it's gonna be much higher than 450. I think it's gonna be much higher, just based on all the development that's gone on in our district in the last.
I think we
When
should move that to
we
another.
pushed, I recall we pushed, with, this is what we'd like to see, affordable housing for, what can happen? And they were pretty upfront with us saying, it's not gonna happen, even with annexation. I think, I had talked with Lance after our meeting, because I was, about in the Holton area where they got, 11 or 12 lots in one area, why they didn't show that on their map, and they explained again why. And I asked them about the UU property. I said, being that it's not technically sold and not, not platted out and it doesn't have annexation, how do you figure that into your numbers? Well, they obviously do figure that more. But, it's an open question. There was a development at Red Brick Road across from Rivercrest that was approved and was gonna go through and installed. So, and I asked them about that. And they said, because of city water and sewer being right there, there's a much greater potential for that. So they do figure that into their numbers a little bit. And I didn't get too deep into it, but, that's another thing we could certainly ask them too.
Yeah, I just really am curious on what MGT thinks, like where they're at with that development and what the projections, if it matches what we are agreeing with Derek Construction, or if they don't agree, or whatever that new number is. I think we need to get a pulse on that a little bit.
Yeah, they're just,
revisit this.
and they've just been
like
looking at average new construction, single family in the district. So some of it's gonna be really high and some of it's gonna be low, and so they're just really looking at average, and we know that development, that at least they're proposed, had everything from estate-style houses, which are gonna be north of $1 million, to stuff that was gonna be what they consider entry-level, sub $500,000. So it was gonna be it's a blend. That whole development is a blend, and some of it is even multifamily and things along those lines.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Just trying to get a little background on
Yep.
that.
All right.
If no other questions, we can move on to board discussion about misinformation regarding school closures. Anybody has something?
If there's anything that anybody has questions about or needs us to clarify, or anything they're hearing or seeing, more than happy to try to.
Mr. President, today I noticed on one of the Facebook pages an anonymous post about the middle school not having sufficient soap or working hand dryers. I know myself, I'm in the middle school quite frequently to pick up kids after activities, and when I frequent the bathrooms in the activity areas, there is soap in them even at the end of the day. So I wonder if you could please comment on that.
Bonnie, I don't know if you did some checking for us today.
Yes, we did have our custodian walk through the building, and all of the bathrooms are full of soap and functional. We do have a couple of the hand dryers that have like blown a circuit or whatever, but they are quickly fixed. So no issues. I'm not sure where that came from.
Okay, appreciate the clarification. Thank you, Bonnie.
I have a question regarding policy. Do we have, because there are all these anonymous posts online that are coming up, some of them appear that they have knowledge and are very certain of the way certain things are, pertaining to busing, pertaining to class sizes. And I'm just kind of curious, is there, what is the policy that's in place for, I mean, like employees of the district that are on social media that are kind of adding to the spread of misinformation? Like, is there anything that at least there's a policy against that? Like, obviously, and I'm not saying that they are district employees. There's no way for anybody to know, and I'm certainly not trying to call anyone out as a district employee, just to make that very clear. But anonymous posts are usually because they don't want to be known. And some of these really appear that they have certainty of this information. So I'm just wondering what is in place for current district employees.
Well, certainly there's an expectation. I mean, we have to draw the, we have to be careful with what hat they're wearing, right? If they identify themselves as a district employee, or they do so on their social media page, and then post not anonymously, but under that title, then we could have conversations with them if it's properly brought to a different, if they're not following the chain of command, right? Like if they're not going to their principal with the concern, or saying something blatantly inaccurate that could be potentially disruptive to the school district environment. We just have to walk that fine line of First Amendment speech, but they do have limits placed upon that First Amendment right when it comes to when they're wearing their employee hat for the district. And it's a matter of, it's related to their employment. That's different than if they're a teacher that may identify themselves as a teacher in the district, but they're talking about taxes, or they're talking about political issues that they have a much broader ability to talk about. But yeah, if it's coming out of their employment.
Player is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think we, so oftentimes we do have conversations. I know building principals sometimes have conversations with staff of like, okay, let's think about how this is looking and let's have a conversation about it. I don't think we have a specific policy other than we do have policies limiting what teachers can post about their classrooms, about things like that. Again, specific to their teacher hat or their employee hat.
I read online the question about our rush to sell properties, Willow or Holton. I actually responded to that one, and not just that, no, we are not currently, the two buildings are not currently listed for sale, and if we were going to, they would have to be a board vote in open session, list them, and then there would, if an offer came in, there would have to be another discussion and board vote and open session to accept any offer. So, again, I said that there has been no discussion about, any offer, or, they're just not listed for sale. So the thought that we would, another thing would be that one of our things is we might be looking to demolish either or both of the buildings, which is a cost, and as Nick has said, it's not a cost that this district would, or this board would be in support of. What happens, down the road after the buildings are sold is dependent on the purchaser, but I just thought I'd bring that up, that we are focused right now on the transition of supporting families, students, and teachers through this rebounding. If anybody else has any comments on that.
Mr. President?
Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering about making an addition to the misleading statement at the bottom of page 3 that goes on to the top of page 4. So it says, we've got a consulting group and applied population study said this was our number of students per unit. I wonder if we want to just put an update with the link to the study and then what the new number of students is from it. Yeah, and that, MGT is showing that we get 0.131, K through 5 students per new housing unit. It might be worth having the link to it right in the doc for someone who might just see this and not that study, so.
Mr. President?
Yes, Brian.
Kind of on the same one, there's been some discussion out in the community, or at least with a small group, criticizing us for not using the applied population laboratory to do this enrollment projection, which of course MGT's enrollment projection effectively confirmed the enrollment projection that applied laboratory did last time. But Nick, I think it might be helpful if you could just talk a little bit about how we hired MGT, how you vetted them.
Yep.
Who we considered, why we didn't use applied population laboratory.
Yep. So first call I made was to Applied Population Labs out of UW-Madison, and I said, hey, we would like to do rebounding of the district. And they said, we don't do that. We will do enrollment projections, but we don't do rebounding process. And I said, okay, where do you have any recommendations? We've also used RSP, who was our last rebounding consultant that does enrollment projections as well. They gave the name of an individual out of Madison, and I don't want to misstate the individual's name, but I contacted him. He said, hey, I have over 2 years worth of work lined up. I cannot do it. However, I'm hearing a lot of positive things about MGT. They are, I think, out of Texas or Florida. He said, but I know Madison has just signed with them to do a 2-year, basically redoing all of their boundaries and everything else. And they've worked with other districts in Wisconsin. So he goes, I'll get you that name. So once he got that name, reached out to them, talked to them about the process. Got a quote or a bid basically from RSP, got one from MGT, and then also asked the gentleman that couldn't do our population because he had too many services, too many things lined up, about what his approximate cost would be, so he could get an idea of, okay, are we in the ballpark? Once looking at MGT, called multiple references on MGT, both in state and out of state, and how they looked and how their process went, and also how their projections did. And they came highly recommended from the different individuals I talked to. So, one of the things that happens is MGT is to do a new boundary, rebounding, but part of when you do a rebounding is you do another enrollment study so that you have the most current information, even though our information was still current. It was 3 years old. So it wasn't, and it was, supposed to be a projection for 10 years. So we were still within that projection window. However, they needed to already get all of our information in order to set the elementary boundaries. So one of the things that happens is they could do the enrollment analysis as well as part of that process. And so that's why we went with MGT. They're a large company. They have worked in 41 different states. They have done work in Minnesota. They've done work in Wisconsin. They're going to talk more extensively about that in their presentation to the community coming up on the 13th. Specific districts they've worked in both in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and the Midwest in general, because I know there's been some questions on that, and working through those pieces. But that was the process behind them. And we did do, like I said, we did do reference checks on them, and they were very positive. So,
Mr. President?
Yes.
And if we had done another study with Applied Population Laboratory, I remember you reached out to them to see how much it would cost and how long it would take, but they don't geocode the students with GIS like MGT does. So it's not like we could have done Applied Population Laboratory for the first half and MGT from the reboundary, and we would have just been spending more.
we would have, yeah, we basically would have been doubling up on that stuff. And so went with a company that could handle everything as opposed to just two different companies and doubling up. And so that's when we went to when we used RSP back in 2017, 2018, we did the reboundering. They were a company that could do both enrollment projections and boundary resetting. It is somewhat of a cottage industry. There's not a lot of companies that do it. Maybe as enrollments are going down across the country, you're going to see more and more of them do it. But it's a very specialized skill. It's not something that school districts utilize a lot, because you try to set your boundaries and then be done with it for a while. And the vast majority of school districts in the country are more rural. I mean, so they tend to work with more urban environments, that have lots of elementaries or lots of feeder patterns. And so that's why you end up with a lot of examples from different places that, may not always look exactly like Hudson. So,
addressing misinformation that I have read recently online, there was some comments about people being absolutely certain that bus costs were going to increase drastically. And there were some other comments about walkers are no longer going to be walkers. They're going to be shuttled to other schools. And the last comment that I wanted to just put out there that I read is that there are no empty classrooms at these buildings. And I actually can speak to that one myself. Molly and I both toured all of the schools, all 6 of the elementary schools in one day with Nick. And there were absolutely empty classrooms, several of them in every single building. Bolton, I think, only had maybe one empty one. But that's, I mean, just talking about the 4 that will remain, there were many empty classrooms in them. So just from 2 board perspectives that I think Molly agrees.
Yes, and I mean, one of the things that when I was responding before our vote is that we had 20 empty classrooms. And we know that people store stuff in classrooms.
Correct.
And might use a classroom, like the counselor might use that classroom, that's what I was told, but that is not necessarily needed. So, yes.
So there appeared to be plenty of space.
Plenty of space.
Yep.
Those kids. So could you talk then on the bus costs, if that actually will be drastically increasing?
yeah, I can talk on both those issues. So right now, when we built the plan, we built it around, I believe, 86 sections at the elementary, which would be a reduction of 7 sections. Our elementaries, going down to 4 elementaries, we'd have 90 classrooms. And so there'd be still, based on that model, we'd still have 4 empty rooms. Not to mention, that model was also built around class sizes of 20 at the K2 level and 25 at the 3 through 5 level. So not only do you have potentially a few empty classrooms, you also have empty spaces in every single classroom to be able to handle additional students.
And that does not include eliminating special services like music or
Correct.
gym or
That's-
Phi Ed. I just want to make that clear also.
Yep,
That we're not
so that is
eliminating
having
things.
plenty of space
Yes.
for all those things as well as 4K. So in addition, so when we look at that 90 sections of classroom spaces, we're also already accounting for 4K classrooms and 4K wrap classrooms. So if all of a sudden the district chose to not do 4K in each of the elementaries, that would add even additional empty classrooms to the mix as we go through that. And that was based on this year's enrollment projections. If we start looking at MGT's enrollment projections over the next 2 or 3 years, we would anticipate that we're probably going to have some additional empty classrooms over the next 2 or 3 years. We're kind of at our high water mark right now over the next 10 years.
And those did include, what Molly and I saw, some very nice special education rooms that were increased in size and space.
Yep, absolutely. And then as far as busing goes, trying to remind people that, are there students that currently are walking to Willow that could qualify to be transported to a different building? Sure. 97%, 93%, I think, of the students at Holton qualify for busing already. And so nothing really changes there. So yes, there could be some students that could change, but I try to remind people that once the boundaries are set, that's when the busing software takes over and we start to create more efficient routes and we start to put the parameters in related to busing and the number of routes. And, we don't anticipate having, we don't anticipate saving a lot of money on routes and we don't anticipate spending a lot of money on routes. I mean, it could be 1 or 2 routes either way. Because people have to understand is, if you're currently going to Holton and you're on a bus and you typically are, and you live way on the far east side of the district, we're not going to bus you up to Holton and then turn and bus you to a different building. The bus route would be recreated from your current house to the building in which you're going to. And so there are going to be some kids that could be on shorter bus rides than they're currently on now. There may be some kids that are on longer bus rides, but that's every year we have that. The bus rides length of time changes. But we keep that parameter, keeping students on the bus for less than an hour is what our target is always trying to do.
Mr. President,
Your mic is off.
can you hear me? No?
Yeah.
Oh. Sorry, I'm getting tired. Comment and a question, I guess. One of the things, kind of building off of Aaron's statement about walkability, I think the perception around particularly Willow is that it is a highly walkable school, and in fact, a fair number of the students actually are bused in from as far out as Burkhart. So it is not, it's a school that has a long boundary like most of ours that extend fairly out. There are some students that do walk, but there are a fair number that do get bused into Willow currently. And then the other thing is there's, I think, some misunderstanding of some of the data that was presented in the MGT study where people are honing in on the decline presented in the middle school and high school. And really, maybe you could expand on this a little bit, Nick, but that I believe what MGT presented to us is that the declines that we're seeing already in the elementary, they are going to carry forward naturally into the middle school and high school. And so the declines that we're seeing here will eventually hit there, and we will have declines as well coming across all of our buildings at various points in time.
Yeah, and we've already started to see that a little bit at the middle school. And I think they said that, the elementaries are going to kind of hit their new stabilization or stabilized levels probably in the next 2 to 3, 4 years. The middle school is going to stabilize probably more in like 5 to 7 years, and the high school is going to finally stabilize closer to 10 years. And what that has to do with is, again, you're bringing in classes of, 290 to 300 in kindergarten and first grade. It takes a while for them to work through the system, and that's where you start to see that enrollment decline. And that's, as we talked about this year, I think we graduated over 460 seniors last year. We brought in 305 kindergartners. And so, it's not people came into our district and then all of a sudden didn't like what we were doing and now they're all leaving. It's just, there's a difference between those two sets of class sizes. And it's going to continue to be that case. So first grade right now, I think is somewhere around 297, 298. Is that right, Andrea? I think we just looked at the sheet. And yeah, so I mean, first grade's 298, kindergarten's 307, but second grade's 326, fifth grade is 353. So all of a sudden, if we bring in another 290 kids to 300 kids in kindergarten, but we have 353 leave in fifth grade, you're going to see the enrollment in the elementaries go down even more. And so it's just a matter of the smaller class sizes coming in before we kind of stabilize. we're not gonna shrink to zero. I mean, that's what everybody, oh my gosh, when does it stop? And, you know, I've said sometimes it's equilibrium, you know, probably a better term, I think Tracy pointed out, was stabilization. When do we actually stabilize at each of the different levels? And I think MGT really kind of talked about that in their presentation last week.
It was also brought up about the difference between the county housing study and the new MGT data, and I think Megan commented on that. Like they said that the birth rates are actually going up. Why does according to the county housing study, but our district only is part of the county, and they were taking, or maybe Maria was in on that too. It's the difference between actual students versus people. Was that? Maybe.
Are you talking about the housing study that's incorrect?
Yes.
Yeah, that looks at all people versus the MGT looked at specifically students. And I wouldn't say that, I mean, as I looked at the data and that MGT presented, I wouldn't have said that was an increase in the birth rate. It's flat and it's going to remain flat. So, I mean, the good news is we're not continuing to see a steep decline necessarily. So that I think is a positive. But it's definitely not an increase that we need to see more kiddos that are coming into kindergarten. That was my takeaway.
Thank you. There are no other comments, questions? That ends our agenda tonight. I would accept a motion to go into closed session, reminding everyone that we will be coming back from closed session to act on.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I move that we convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statute 19.85, parent 1, parent E, to deliberate or negotiate the sale of public property, whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session.
Second.
Second by Kate. Do a roll call. Dahl?
Aye.
Garza?
Aye.
Gerlach?
Aye.
Powers?
Aye.
Brzezowski?
Aye.
Rudy?
Aye.
Bauman? Aye. We are now in closed session.
District office on 644 Brocky Drive at the price of $1.8 million and allow for Bob Board the offer agreement.
Second from Megan. We'll do a roll call vote. Dahl?
Aye.
Gerlach?
Aye.
Powers?
Aye.
Brzezowski?
Aye.
Rudy?
Aye.
Bauman? Aye. That motion is adopted. And now I would accept a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Aaron?
I will second.
Second from Maria. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. We are adjourned.
Where you're gonna